Alrighty, welcome everyone. We're going to just take a second to virtually file in before we get going. As I'm sure people are tired of hearing, this is where I would put the Jeopardy music if I had it readily available, and yet I forget every time, but that's okay. So thank you everyone for coming out tonight. I'm Gracie, I'm the events coordinator for print. A few little housekeeping details just before we get started. If you have any questions during the event, please feel free to enter them in the chat box on the bottom right or in the question and answer function, which is on the bottom bar of your screen. If you'd like a copy of Beneficence, I will include the link to the print page in the chat box. Our copies had a little delay and the pub date was switched around a little, but they'll be with us shortly. And as soon as we have them, they'll be right in your hands. We also have signed book plates if you'd like a signed copy, and just feel free to specify that in checkout. And now for our speakers. Monica Wood is an award-winning best-selling novelist, short story writer, and memoirist. She was born in Maine, and she worked as a guidance counselor and in a nursing home before becoming a full-time writer. Meredith Hall's memoir, Without a Map, was instantly recognized as a classic and became a New York Times bestseller. Beneficence will be published on October 6th, and she divides her time between Maine and California. So please join me in virtually welcoming Monica Wood and Meredith Hall.
Hello.
Hi, everybody. Well, Meredith, I am so completely thrilled to be talking to you because this is probably the best novel I've read in 10 years anyway. It is still living inside me. I read it about a month ago. And what I should probably show it, I don't know, is this the cover that's going to be on the real one? So I have a, this is an advanced copy that's not fully copy edited, although what the copy editor had to do I have no idea, because the prose is absolutely stunning. So anyway, I'm just going to if you don't mind, I'm going to describe your book to our friends out there. It's called Beneficence, and it follows a family, a mother and a father and 3 children, and it's a dairy farm in a small kind of rural, very rural town in Maine called Alstead. And this is, it starts in 1947, and we span the time from there until 1965. And it's divided into before, during, and after. And the before, which is the only part we can really talk about, and that's the first 70 pages of the book. The before describes this unbelievably idyllic, almost an Eden of family love and this beautiful farm that Tup, the husband, inherited from his family. It's so beautiful how you set all this up, and then something happens to completely fracture this beautiful, loving family who live on this beautiful land. And it brought me to my knees and made me happy to be there. That's the only thing I can say. And for anybody out there who's saying to themselves, well, I don't know, this is COVID, I do not want to read a sad book right now. I just want to tell you, it's not the kind of sadness that empties you out. It's the kind of sadness that fills you up. And there's so much redemption and mercy and affirmation of life in this book that I highly, highly, highly recommend it. I will give you your money back if you don't like this book. It's really gorgeous. So I have a bunch of questions that I want to ask you about it, Meredith, but because the book's not out yet, it's coming out on October 5th, 6th? Yeah. So, so we can't really talk about during and after. We can only talk about before, but there's so much in the before that prepares us for what comes later. And that's one thing when I was rereading it today, I thought, wow, she sets everything up so beautifully, but you don't know what's happening when you're reading it for the first time. So I guess I'd like to ask you first, things that people always want to know. So this is only your second book.
Yes.
Yeah, and the first one was a memoir. So this is your first novel, which is amazing to me. but first novels usually come out when people are in their 20s, you know. So I think when we have some age on us, you know, really it is, wisdom does come with age. So I think you're, you know, somebody who's not 25 is in a better position to turn out a first novel like this, probably, just because you have so much more of life behind you. But I guess I want to know, where was the spark for this novel and how long did you work on it? Because the other book came out quite a bit of time ago now.
Yes, it did. I wrote my memoir in a period I won a wonderful writing grant. I had never written much. I had a couple essays out. I won this grant. I closed up my house in Maine. I had a couple kids in San Francisco. I moved to San Francisco for that time. And I wrote my memoir, and it was a sort of a logical thing. It all fell into place. It made sense to me. And when the memoir was done, I traveled around with it for a while, a couple years, and then said, you know, I'm not going to do memoir again. I was proud of the book. I was very happy with the book in the world, but I really had talked about my own life enough, and I wanted to change over to fiction. And I felt that I was ready to do that. I'm a big reader. I taught nonfiction at the University of Hampshire for many years, and I thought, well, how hard can this be?
Famous last words.
And so I started writing a novel, and after 3 years, I had 60 pages. I had spent months and months looking for my story. Finally, the story came to me, and I knew instantly that I had it. So that kickstarted it. And it took me 3 years to write 60 pages. I really had no idea how to make the shift from memoir to fiction. And then I did that. I muddled around with that for quite a long time. And then it just really seemed as if all of a sudden the doorway opened. What I was doing came clear to me, and I walked through that door and wrote the book. I will say that I've been fascinated to feel now with these 2 books written that, you know, my memoir is a very intimate story. I tell stories in that book that I had never told my closest friends. Nobody knew these stories. Mm-hmm. And so it seemed so intimate to me. But this novel, in a strange way, feels more revealing of me than my memoir does. There's a sense I have that my brain and my heart are absolutely on the page of this book, and feels as if I sort of split myself open and said, okay, everybody walk right in. So that's been a really interesting experience for me, that the fiction feels much more raw and much riskier to me than my memoir did.
That doesn't surprise me at all, because it is a very intimate book, and it's a very honest book about parental love and parental need, and love between parents, and, you know, parent-child love, just all, and it feels like, it doesn't feel autobiographical at all, but it feels like a lived experience, if you get the difference. I know you get the difference.
Yes, it's not, you know, it's made up. It's an entirely made up story.
Right.
I don't know these people. I never lived this life. Mm-hmm. But it definitely is. It's speaking from a deep emotional experience for me. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, I want to start kind of at the beginning, and I'm going to have you read just a little bitty thing, because I want to ask you about it, and it will give the people who are listening here a sense of what the book's about and how you're approaching it. So, for one thing, the prose, I have to say, is so immersive and beautiful that you don't really know you're reading. You're just kind of living this life with this family, and it's the daily grind of farm work. I feel like I have now worked on a farm. I really do. It's amazing. But they love this work. They appreciate the work. They're so happy to be married and in love and having these 3 children, and each of the loving dynamics of this family, how each child is equally but differently loved, and how each child is precious but different from one another. And you can imagine them, even though we only see them mostly as young children. you kind of know what they're going to be like when they're 40 or 50. There are certain kids who are born 40, and all those kids feel that way to me. You can see who they're going to be, which I love. That was very, I think, difficult to do, and you did it so beautifully. So you get the feeling that I think you work very hard to convince us that in that first 70 pages that love can conquer anything, that no matter what this family faces, they can face it together, that there's nothing they can't endure. And then something happens to completely fracture this family. And there are, even though the whole first 70 pages is really laying out, it's the lay of the land, almost literally, it's laying out the beautiful circumstances of this family and where they live and what they do, but you scatter things into the pages that make it really suspenseful in a funny way, because nothing really happens in the first 70 pages. It's just they milk the cows and they bring in the things and they make the pies and they read at night and they do all this stuff. But there's a tension in it that's so much harder to do than people think. So it's a really beautiful tension. So in the very first scene, Doris, the mother, and she's a young mother at this point, that there's only 2 kids at this point, and they're little toddlers, and she briefly loses track of them. She's out hanging clothes on the line and briefly loses track of them. And her reaction to that, it's just a few minutes and they're right there and nothing happened, and it's a farm and kids, run off and do these things. But her reaction to it is so profound that right then a little thing went off in my head thinking, this woman is a lot more fragile than she appears to be. She's this wonderful, hardworking farm wife, but there's a fragility there when it comes to her family. And there's another spot, and I'm going to have you read. Well, there's one spot on page 23 when this is kind of soon after that happens, and Dodie says, but I have learned that nothing terrible is going to happen here. You have to be careful to pay attention, and then you just trust that everything is going to be all right. It's the price you pay for the quiet and beauty of the land. Sometimes I think we're a little family on an island here, protected from all the world's problems. And that's the feeling you get in the beginning of that they really have created a little oasis. And there's another spot, this is on page 70, Meredith, if you would read it, and it's the very last part of the first section. Page 70, and it's Tup, the father. If you can start with these evenings bring great peace. So this is a typical evening in their family. Sonny, the oldest boy, is reading Robin Hood to the whole family. I mean, this is 1947, but it could be 1847. They have very few creature comforts except each other. So if you would read that section, I would love it.
Okay. Yes, this is Tup, the father. These evenings bring quiet peace, and yet I was filled suddenly with an ache that startled me and then scared me. How could I not name its source? The tip of the screwdriver slipped and gouged my hand slightly, and I watched as if it were someone else's hand, as a tiny drop of blood rose and slid in a thin line down my palm. I raised my eyes to the kitchen, to my wife and my daughter, to the early dark of winter beyond, hearing the gentle lull of my son's voices from down the hall, the water running at the sink. And I was so frightened, I laid the tool on the table and moved quickly out the door to the shed and outside into the cold, hard air, holding my bleeding hand apart from me, standing under the sweep of stars, weeping from a place I did not know.
So, this is Tup, and he is he's a tough guy. I mean, he's this farmer, he built this, he completely, he's built all the walls and the floors and all this stuff. And yet there's this, I feel like it's an undercurrent under everything in that first section. There's so much happiness, yet right underneath it is this, I feel like it's almost like a Catholic sensibility. It reminded me very much of how I felt for a long time that there was always the other shoe was going to drop, that there's this potential loss under every happiness that you have.
Yes, I
That's
think
what I feel there.
this family, they believed in what they had in this place, the land and the barn and the fields and the creek and the orchards. The land itself was so generous, so beneficent. It was so generous. And they believed in their family. They believed in their love and their devotion to each other. And they believed in their hard work and the rhythms of that work and the good that came from those rhythms. What they sensed, though, what they were afraid of, was some unnamed thing from outside. There was something that they could not control that was going to happen to them, that all of this care and love, all of this attention to the details of home and farm, there was something that even with that, they were not going to be able to protect themselves.
Right. There's this whole, Doris she's kind of shy. She doesn't feel she quite belongs in town. She's from a different town. And, you know, that's a main thing sometimes where you don't quite belong. And she wants to stay put. She doesn't want to go out. She wants to stay with her family, inside that cocoon that they've made. And, you know, even though this book is most obviously about how to let go of grief and bitterness and anger from these things that happen, it's also, I feel, about letting go, not hoarding your happiness. That there's something almost biblical about it, like that if you, love is a gift, and if you hoard it, you'll be punished by gods, you know?
Very interesting. Yeah.
I really felt that way, like they would just, it wasn't gonna be that they would be that happy forever. It couldn't be, because they had too much of it.
Yes, yeah. Yes, and the event that strikes this family is larger than it is for most families. So when that love is challenged, when all these things they believe in and trust are challenged, it's a big blow to them. And you know, I imagined this family as a family that is so well integrated with each other. They work so well together. Their love for each other is so profound, and it's a very decent love. It's a very decent love that they feel for each other. It's a respectful love. And I was especially interested in looking at what happens when people who have worked hard at that kind of love, who have established that kind of stronghold within their family, what happens when they recognize that they are not up to this challenge, that they are not succeeding at fending off this challenge. And I was very interested in what the accounting is for these people, for this mother and father especially, as they recognize, they know that they are they know that they are failing to bring what their love had promised. They're failing to meet that promise. And I became very interested in how they make their way around that reckoning, around that recognition.
There's something else you do that I found really interesting, and I'm going to have you read the little part. It's on, where is it? There are three narrators in the book. There's Tup and Doris, and then there's also Dodie, who grows older during this book. She's the middle child, the only girl. This is on page 86, and this is after the fracture in the family. And if you would read, let's see, where is it? 86, yeah. Down near the end of that first section, one thing I always loved, that part.
So this is Dodie, and she is still a young girl. I'd have to locate myself in the story here to see.
I think she's about 11 right there.
I think I was going to say, I think she's about 11 in this year.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I always loved in this house was lying in bed and knowing that each of us was there in our place while the dark came into our rooms and bound us together for the night. Sonny in his room, Beston in his, Mom and Daddy in theirs, me and mine. No one had to stand guard. Now we all do. Some nights I go to Mom and Daddy's door and look in. Mom lies straight in bed next to Daddy. He isn't touching her hair. She isn't lying across his legs.
I'm going to stop you there because there's something we don't want them to hear, the next thing.
Okay.
But how you describe, it's the same kind of prose, it's the same beauty in the prose, but it's about what isn't there instead of what is there. You know, Mom is not lying across his legs. She doesn't have, it gets you like a gut punch. It's about the absence of what they had before, yes. Which makes what they had even more irreplaceable.
And Dodie is she's a very interesting child. She is a child who, she is the one in the family pressing with questions and pushing her parents constantly to bring something larger and something more. And she's sort of our reporter. She reports in these episodes what was, what she remembers, and what is. And she moves fluidly between her memory and what is now, helping us understand all that was lost.
You know, there's something else that I hope I can articulate this correctly, but there is something about what you do with parental love in this. There's one point where toward the beginning, and I think it's Doris who says it, that once her son was born, her first son was born, all the dreams she ever had for herself just completely went away. And she says something like, I willingly give that life to this life. And there's a lot of stuff about that, and just the way they kind of are always closing ranks with each other. And I wondered if there was a kind of almost a hubris in that, or there's so much about parental love in here, and some of it is about selflessness, but there's also a or at least a neediness. There's such a great need to keep your children with you forever. You know, at one point Tup says, you know, I think let's build 3 houses on the property so the kids can all stay here and raise their kids. And even though they know that probably won't happen, they both love that idea. So there was that kind of push-pull and the needy. They were wonderful parents, but there was this almost uncomfortable neediness, especially in Doris, to me. Is that something that you intended to put in there, or did they just come that way?
Yes, I hadn't thought of it in those terms. I hadn't thought of it in terms of neediness. I thought of it in terms of this idea that by separating the family from the world, this island that Doris feels they have created, this island on this beautiful, beautiful old farm. And this farm goes back generations. This is a belongingness that is cell deep in this family. And it seems to me that she has almost a jealous guarding of her children, so that when Dodie first asks if a friend can come over for the dinner, Doris has a very hard time with it. And then the friend, Marion, actually spends the night. And Doris hovers around the hallway upstairs, eavesdropping on them, and going back downstairs and fretting to Tup that, you know, maybe we shouldn't allow these children to come. And Tup says very clearly to her, you know, we need to allow them this chance. And then Doris gets smarter and she says back, yes, you know, we have to allow the children to share this love that they feel. But she is very uneasy about the idea.
Yeah, she doesn't want to.
I think there's a feeling for her that there is some great physical harm out there that she can protect her children from if she just does not let that world in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know, it's so interesting. And I thought, you know, if she hadn't been that way, if maybe the tragedy wouldn't have happened, you know,
Yeah.
I feel like she was in some ways being the agent of her own destruction by being so selfish is the wrong word, but so unwilling. She's not willing. She's unwilling to share her family.
Yes. Yes, she
You know?
is. Yeah.
Mhm. It's very complicated and nuanced, and it has, I mean, I feel like it's one of those books where you really learn about the human condition. You learn things that we all know somewhere back there,
Mhm.
but you bring it to us in a way that we say, oh, right, that's so true. That is
Well,
so
you know,
true.
I didn't know these people as I started writing this. I had no idea who they were or what they were going to do. I understood that there was going to be this event.
Mhm.
And I knew that they were a family that was rooted on this place, this land that was so important to them. But I didn't know more than that. And as I wrote and they developed, I became very, I loved them. I loved these people very much. And I felt a great heartbreak watching their struggles to come to terms with all of this. And in that early section, I loved them so fully for the largeness, that kind of capaciousness that they had for
Mhm.
love as a family.
Mhm.
And as I went along, I saw this event as a random event. It could happen to anybody.
Mhm.
There
Mhm.
was no fault. They struggle with a feeling of guilt and a feeling of responsibility. If I had only not done this, part
Yeah.
of Doris's thinking is if I had not let children come,
Mhm. Yeah.
if I hadn't let the outside world come. But they struggle with these feelings. But I really was very interested in the kind of that moment that anything can happen, and it happened, and
Mhm.
how these people struggle to regain their sense. They believe so much. Beneficence is really, this is a book about that kind of goodness. They believe so completely in that, and
Mhm.
their effort to kind of swim against this tremendous current back toward that. They recognize it, they remember it, they know their obligations to it. But it was really a learning process for me as I watched them unfold on the page. And it actually surprised me. Doris has a very hard time finding her way back. It's
Mm.
a very hard road for
Oh,
her to find her way back.
killer. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was surprised too. And I was very mad at her a few times. I just
Yeah.
wanted her to, but it's like anybody else. You have to make your own journey. And she did, and she does.
And Dodie was very angry with her, and Tup
Yeah.
was very angry with her. And yet, I don't think that she holds more blame
No,
in any of this, you know.
not at all. Yeah. We have a little question here in the chat, and it says, did you ever consider having the youngest son, Beston, he's the baby brother, be one of the narrators? If I'm not mistaken, he's the only family member who didn't get to be. Also, is he named after Henry Beston?
He was not. I don't know. I don't know where these characters found their names. They arrived in my lap already named, so I don't know where that name comes from. They call him Best most of the time, his nickname. So Bestin is not given a voice, and part of that was just a kind of strategizing as a writer. 3 voices is a lot. They run in a cycle through the book. So we hear Doris, the mother, and then Dodie, the child, the girl, and their daughter, and then Tup. And we hear that round over and over again through the book. All 3 of them have a chance to speak to us. They reminisce a lot. They share their memories a lot.
Yeah.
Tell stories. They're great storytellers. And Bestin is the youngest child. He's a very quiet child. He's a very observant child and a very, very sensitive boy. And he doesn't have voice. Part of it was that it felt to me that those 3 voices were already enough. Part of it is that a very small child, that's a very tricky narrator for us.
It is.
It's Dodie was a very mature 10 and 11 and 13,
Right.
14, 15-year-old girl. And she had a lot to tell us. Beston was so small that I didn't really think that he could add to that story. But I will say, I have always laughed at writers who write sequels. I had no idea where the sequel would come from. And I have thought again and again that I'm not sure I'm done with Beston.
He's really interesting. I really liked him older, when he was older. He was really interesting. And Sonny does not get a voice in the book either. So it's just Dodie's the only child who gets
who speaks. That's right. Just the daughter. That's right.
So she's a great character, and she's so smart. I just love it. So here's from somebody. I'm so bad at this. Let's see. Okay. Another question. What was the process like writing the characters as they developed? Did you even initially know how they looked? How did you discern what the right direction was for their growth or evolution? So there you go. It's a good writer's question.
Yes, it is. That's a wonderful writer's question.
Mm-hmm.
So I found again and again, excuse me, I knew the essential plot. I knew the events that were going to happen. And I knew that they lived on a farm. It was a life that I longed for all my life, and I was going to get to write this farm that I always wished had been my life. And so there was a kind of delicious quality for me of putting these people on this farm. Beyond that, I had no idea who they were. I actually thought that Tup initially was going to be sort of a bad guy. I think, having come out of memoir,
that would have been awful.
I thought that Tup was going to be I thought my eye was going to be on him because he was going to be a man who made bad decisions and misbehaved and justified it all. And that I was just stunned to find out that's not who he was at all. I came to love him fully and feel great compassion for him. He has an extraordinary strength and an extraordinary capacity to love. But I laughed at myself often, saying, why will you people not do what I ask you to do? Why won't you behave? This is not what we were going to do today.
Yes,
so,
exactly. I know the feeling.
It's I think that our work is to watch and listen very carefully. These someplace in our very deep psyche, we know these people, we know these traits, we know these behaviors, we know this speech. And I think that we just need to sort of get out of the way and let it happen on the page. It's a really extraordinary experience to have that work move onto the page without your awareness or decision making. It's as if decisions are being made at such a deep level, you're not even aware of it day to day.
Well, the thing I love about going through this book with them through their life really is, it's easy to love and be loved when you're not tested.
Yes.
And they are sorely tested. That's what I mean. It feels like a Bible story in a funny way, and it's so big. And they show us who they are, and who they are is not as beautiful as we thought. He's not bad, and they're good, decent, wonderful people, but they are deeply flawed like everybody, and they make terrible decisions under the strain of sorrow.
Yes.
But that makes them so real and so worthy of loving and caring about. I still remember them so well, and novels these days go out of my head in a week, and I still have so much invested in this. This is funny because you could ask this of a reader too, because these characters, anyway, the question is, how has the experience of writing Beneficence influenced your life? How do the characters live on in you?
The first part of that question is really interesting. I'll start with the second part of it. I was shocked after writing a memoir to discover how completely I inhabited this world with these people. I felt as if I was a family member living in this house. I was part of these rhythms of work. And I came to love them so much and to identify with them so much that I actually went through an extremely difficult period as I wrote this moment that comes at this family and the after effects of it. I had a very, very difficult time. I cried a lot, and I felt the loss and I felt their grief very powerfully. And I would cry, I'd wake up at night crying about this, and I would have to laugh at myself saying, you're the one writing this.
I know, it's your fault.
You can change this. These people do not have to suffer like this. But it just, they were really, really part of my bloodstream by then. And they were writing their story. They were in the story and they were writing their story. And I needed to be there with them while they did that. How the people have stayed with me, it's an interesting thing. I get homesick. It's a funny word, but I get homesick for this place and this family. I actually miss them. So these opportunities to read fragments, it's like going home. It feels pretty wonderful. Yeah.
This is from Katie McDonald. She says, hi, Meredith. It's so wonderful to see your face and hear your voice again. Former student from 1997 to 2001. All right. My question is, how long has this story been whispering to you, and when did you know it was time to tell it to the world?
Actually, the experience I had was that I knew that I wanted to write a novel, and I couldn't find the story. I'm a person who, everything is interesting to me, and I write down notes. I have literally hundreds and hundreds of bits of paper with ideas on them, things I've read, things I've seen, things I've heard. And I thought, surely in those 2 cartons of slips of paper, my story is waiting for me. And I went over them, and I would, you drive, you shower, you take a walk on the beach, and you're constantly, I was scouring for the story. And then it actually came to me in a snippet of a man who lived in my town, and we were having a chat over the back of his pickup truck. And he mentioned a story, something that had happened to his brother. And it caught me, and I thought instantly, that's it, that's my story. And so I really stumbled on this story. I wasn't able to just name it at the beginning. But once I stumbled on it, boy, it sure felt like it was there waiting to be written.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, well, it has lived in me in this funny little way. I have to tell you this, Meredith. There's a scene somewhere, I could not find it. So it might be in a memory later in the book. I couldn't find it in the first third. But Doris is just washing the dishes. She's just washing the dishes at night, looking out at the farm and her land and feeling so grateful to be here, doing for her family, to be just here in this place, in this moment. And every time, I used to hate cleaning up the kitchen after dinner, which is pretty hubristic myself since I don't do the cooking, but I just hate cleaning up the kitchen after dinner. And now I love it. Oh, wow. Because I feel grateful to have a kitchen, to have somebody to clean up for, to, all of those things that I just, every single time now, I just appreciate the moment.
I think that this is a story in many ways about gratitude. I think that this family recognizes that they are blessed and that they feel grateful for that. In the very first section, Doris gets up out of bed early in the morning, and Tup is already out starting his chores, and she's pulling the bed together, and she says, we know enough to be grateful for this.
Oh, it's so beautiful. And there's this one line that, oh, you had me at this. It's on the first page, and she says, oh, I slide my hand across the place my husband slept, drawing the blankets up and closing in the warmth, like a memory of us, until night comes when we will lie down together again. It's so beautiful. And that's their love right there. I mean, you're with these people you want to be with. There's another question from Katie. Who are you reading now? If in the pandemic world you have the capacity to read, and who do you read for inspiration?
So for inspiration, I actually am a lover of Faulkner. Not everybody loves Faulkner, but I do. I admire, I find, I truly, it's as if he's a conduit of God. I have no idea how he constructs these stories. And I love Kent Harif,
Me too.
Marilyn Robinson. I'm reading right now, actually. I've been involved, first of all, I will say, having met Monica in the last several weeks, I have been reading Monica's work, and I read first her memoir, which is extraordinary, When We Were the Kennedys, and then a novel. I'm not sure where in your list of novels, Monica, but Any Bitter Thing. I'm not just sure where that is in your work.
That's number 4. Yeah.
Number 4. And I think Monica and I have sort of recognized each other in a way. Monica builds a world, both in her memoir and in her fiction. She builds a world that is so complete and with characters that she feels so much love and compassion for that you do not want to close the book. It is details build this world, just the small everyday details of living a life and being a family, belonging to each other. And it really had a powerful effect on me. I was really grateful that I had been inside these books.
Oh, thank you.
And what am I reading? I read several things at once right now. I'm reading Simon Van Buy. I was not familiar with his work, and my editor, Josh Bodwell, turned me onto his work. And if you haven't met him yet, it's Van Buy, B-O-O-Y. And Simon Van Buy is just a wonderful young writer. So that's been my reading in the last few days.
Oh, that's nice. Then there's one from Simon. I've already read the book and wept through the second half. In terms of editing, how do you know when a book is finished? Do you ever want to just keep tinkering forever and ever?
So, I taught writing for many, many years. And of course, I taught draft, revise. But I don't write that way. There's something different about my process. I think that I am I think I'm writing at the word and sentence level as I go. I write, I think what I'm doing is revising as I write. So I write very attentively, and I'll move back immediately. As soon as it's written, I go back and I revise that. I move sentences, I delete something. I might move that paragraph someplace before or hold it and build to it. And then when I'm done, I really am done. I don't go back. I have not with either book revised the book. And so I think I'm doing it somehow. Somehow it sounds chaotic, but somehow it works for me that I am actually doing that work as I move through it. So it's a slow and attentive process for me. And how we know our books are done, I think that we know. I've always made the claim with my students that when you send this out, you send an essay or a poem or a story out, and you know when it's ready and when it's not, and you might send it when it's not ready. But I believe we know when we're done, and we know when it's as good as we can make it, and that's when your story is done.
That question actually was from Simon Van Buy.
Oh, well, Simon, wow. I wish I could read Simon.
Yeah, I love that. Oh, that is great. Wow. Is there anything else you want to say about the book, or read from the book, or something you want to?
So how much time do we have?
Well, we have a couple minutes before 7:50, which is when it's supposed to end.
So, I could close with a short bit. Let me see if this will work. This is Tup speaking, and he, you remember, has taken over this farm from generations before him. His father actually saved money and sent Tup to college. He wanted Tup, one of his sons, his oldest son, he wanted him off the farm. He wanted to spare him of the life on the farm. And he managed, it was quite a remarkable thing in that time. He managed to get one of his boys off the farm into college. And then the father died, and Tup had to quit college and come home. And he did that willingly. He did that without looking back. My father is buried on the hill under the old pines next to my mother and his parents and grandparents and great-grandparents. But some days I hear the voice of my father calling to me, small and far away. You scuttled the life I offered to you. I watch as if we are in a film that is fading. He is standing beside the horses, two good Belgians named Mick and Bonnie, and the mowing bar is silent for the moment. I am sitting in my father's seat on the number 9, the same sickle mower my grandfather used on those tired old fields. Great long lines of cut clover and alfalfa lie out behind us, drying in the sun and wind. It is early June of a good year, and the grass is thick and tall, nearly to my shoulders. I am just a boy, thin and willing, but not of any real help to my tired father. My mother is still alive and understands that I will come in for supper tired out and satisfied. Excuse me, that my father will come in for supper tired out and made bitter by the long days of racing ahead of the rain and broken teeth on the mowing bar and the fox kits their mother couldn't move out of the way fast enough as we bore toward them. God damn it, he yelled as the mother danced her grief 20 feet from the soft whir and jingle of the scissoring bars. God damn it, a helpless man. I am a boy, and I share his shock of responsibility, but the wind is up, perfect for drying the hay, and Mick and Bonnie do their labor for us willingly and well, and the crows are gathering to clean their own meal from the stubble.
Well, that is a perfect way to end, Meredith. Thank you so much. Thank you to Print and Gracie for doing all the legwork here. And thank you for those of you who came to see Meredith.
Thank you, Monica. Thank
Buy
you.
the book. You will not be sorry.
Thank you
Bye,
so much.
everybody.
Thank you, Print. Thank you, Gracie. Bye-bye.